The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled me from a fog of medication. My throat felt like sandpaper, and the fluorescent lights above made my eyes ache. I tried to piece together why I was here, but everything was a blur after collapsing at work. My name is Liddy, and this wasn't how I planned to spend my Tuesday afternoon. You're awake. Ethan's voice came from somewhere to my left. My husband of 15 years stood there in his perfectly pressed suit, but something was off. He wasn't rushing to my side or asking how I felt. Instead, he kept his distance, hands clasped behind his back like he was about to give a business presentation. What happened? I managed to croak out. Severe dehydration and exhaustion, he said, his voice clinical. The doctors want to run more tests. I nodded, trying to catch his eye, but he kept staring at the wall behind me. After 15 years of marriage, I knew every one of his tells. The way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. How he wouldn't meet my gaze. The slight tremor in his usually confident voice. Ethan? He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes made my heart monitor skip a beat. I can't do this anymore, Liddy. Do what? But I already knew. Part of me had known for months, watching him work later and later, seeing the growing distance in his eyes over dinner.
This.
Us. He gestured vaguely between us. I want a divorce. The monitor beside me started beeping faster. A nurse poked her head in, but Ethan waved her away with his practiced charm. Always so concerned about appearances, even now. You're telling me this here? While I'm in a hospital bed. My voice cracked, but I refused to cry. Not in front of him. I thought it would be easier, he said, as if breaking someone's heart could ever be easy. More controlled. I almost laughed at that. Of course, he'd want to control this too, just like he tried to control everything else. But something else nagged at me. Something in his hurry to do this now, here, when I was at my weakest. There's someone else, isn't there? His silence was all the answer I needed. The monitor kept its steady rhythm now, but inside, everything was falling apart. 15 years of memories, promises, and shared dreams crumbling in the sterile hospital air. Her name is Clara, he finally said. She's... I held up my hand. Get out. He hesitated, mouth opening like he had more to say, but I turned away, staring out the window at the setting sun. After a moment, I heard his expensive shoes click across the floor and the door close behind him. Only then did I let the tears fall, wondering how I'd tell our daughter that her father had just blown up our world in a hospital room on a random Tuesday afternoon. Coming home from the hospital felt like walking into someone else's life. Everything looked the same. The family photos on the walls, Mia's backpack thrown carelessly by the stairs, even Ethan's coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter. But nothing felt right anymore. I found Mia in her room, headphones on, homework spread across her bed. When she saw me, her face lit up for a moment before darkening with concern. Mom, are you okay? She pulled her headphones off. Dad said you were sick, but he wouldn't tell me anything else. Of course he wouldn't. He'd leave the hard conversations to me, just like always.
I'm fine. Svetad.
Just overdid it at work. I sat on the edge of her bed, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. Have you been sleeping? She shrugged, fidgeting with her pencil. I heard you and Dad fighting last week. About the yoga studio downtown. My stomach clenched. The yoga studio where Clara worked. Where Ethan had been spending his late nights at the office. It's complicated, honey. I'm not stupid, Mom. Mia's voice cracked. Something's wrong. Dad barely comes home anymore, and when he does, you both act weird. Like now, you're doing that thing with your hands. I looked down to find myself twisting my wedding ring, just like my grandmother Grace used to twist hers when she was upset. The memory of her hit me hard, her wisdom, her strength. What would she say about all this? You're right, I said finally. Things are
changing.
Your father and I. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Found something you need to see. Check your email. Mom, sorry, sweetie. Give me 1 second. I opened my email and froze. There were photos, dozens of them. Ethan and a young woman with perfect yoga-toned arms, leaving restaurants, sharing intimate moments. The timestamps went back months. Is that Dad? I hadn't heard Mia move behind me. Quickly, I locked the phone, but it was too late. She'd seen enough. He's leaving us, isn't he? Her voice was small, younger than her 14 years. Before I could answer, we heard the front door open. Ethan's voice called up the stairs. Mia? I thought we could grab dinner. Mia's face hardened in a way no child should. I have homework, she shouted back, then turned to me. I found something in Grandma Grace's old desk yesterday. A letter for you. I think maybe she knew this would happen. She pulled an envelope from her desk drawer, Grace's elegant handwriting spelling out my name. As I took it, I heard Ethan's footsteps on the stairs, coming to play his role as the caring father while his other life waited in a downtown yoga studio. My hands trembled as I opened the letter, wondering what final wisdom my grandmother had left to guide me through this mess. I met Mark at our usual spot, the corner booth at Joey's Diner, where we'd spent countless high school afternoons plotting our futures. Now, 20 years later, we were plotting something entirely different. You're sure about these? I spread the photos across the table, careful to keep them away from my coffee cup. Each one felt like a fresh punch to the gut. Mark ran a hand through his disheveled hair. There's more. The yoga studio? It's not just where they met. Ethan's company bought the building 3 months ago, way below market value. Let me guess, right around when the affair started? Actually, Mark slid a document across the table. The purchase went through 2 months before that. Clara Jensen was the previous owner. The nan hit me like a sweater. Hearing it made everything more real, gave shape to the shadow that had been haunting my marriage. She sold it to him? For practically nothing. And now she's teaching there, living in the upstairs apartment rent-free. The bell above the diner door chimed. A young woman in yoga pants walked in, all perfect posture and glowing skin. Our eyes met for a brief moment before she quickly looked away, hurrying to the counter. That's her, isn't it? I whispered. Mark nodded, watching her order a green smoothie. She couldn't have been more than 26, maybe 27. She looks scared, I said, surprising myself. Liddy. Mark reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of mine. There's something else. The inheritance from Grace. It's significant. Like, life-changing significant. But the conditions. What conditions? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Mia. Dad's here. He's packing stuff. Says he's staying at a hotel. Mom, please come home. I stood up so fast my coffee spilled. As I grabbed my purse, Clara turned from the counter. Our eyes met again, and this time, she didn't look away. I'm sorry, she mouthed silently. Something in her expression made me pause. Fear? Guilt? Or was it a warning? Mark, I need you to do one more thing for me, I said, still watching Clara. Find out everything you can about that property deal. Something's not right. Already on it. He gathered the photos quickly. But Liddy, be careful. The numbers I'm seeing, this might be bigger than just an affair. I rushed out, my grandmother's unopened letter still burning a hole in my purse. Whatever Grace had known, whatever she'd tried to warn me about, I had a feeling I was about to find out the hard way. Back at the hospital for follow-up tests, I found myself in the same room where Ethan had dropped his bomb. But this time, I wasn't alone. Mr. Graham, the elderly man from the next room over, had wheeled himself in for a visit. You look troubled, young lady, he said, placing a worn leather book on my bedside table. Like someone reading a story they can't quite understand. I picked up the book, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The spine was cracked from years of reading. My late wife's favorite, he explained. A story about secrets destroying a marriage. Though sometimes the secrets protect us more than we know. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Found something. The yoga studio deal. It's connected to 3 other properties. All sold below market value. All to shell companies. Call me us up. Bad news. Mr. Graham asked. I'm not sure yet. I set the phone down, my hands shaking. How did you know? When your wife was keeping secrets. He smiled sadly. I didn't. That was my mistake, assuming her secrets were about hurting me, when really, she was trying to protect our family from something bigger than us both. A knock at the door interrupted us. Clara Jensen stood there, looking nothing like the confident yoga instructor from the diner. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, before I could speak. "I know I shouldn't be here, but—" She glanced nervously down the hallway. "There's something you need to know about Ethan. About the properties." Mr. Graham wheeled himself toward the door. "I believe this is my cue to leave. Remember what I said about secrets, Mrs. Carson. Sometimes the story we think we're reading isn't the one we're in at all." As he left, Clara moved closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Ethan's not just buying properties. There's money moving through them. Bad money. I didn't know at first, I swear. But when I figured it out, that's why you're really with him?" The pieces started falling into place. "To get evidence?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "But he's figured out that I know. Yesterday, She pulled up her sleeve, revealing dark bruises.
I'm scarred, Lydia. Not just for me."
My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Mia. "Mom, Dad's acting weird. He's going through Grandma Grace's old office boxes. Says he needs to find some papers." The letter. Grace's inheritance. The property deals. Suddenly, I understood what my grandmother had been trying to tell me. This wasn't just about a failing marriage or a younger woman. This was about something much darker, and Grace had known all along. "Clara," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "tell me everything." The Riverside restaurant was Ethan's choice, expensive, public, and perfectly calculated to keep me in check. I arrived early, Grace's letter and Mark's financial documents tucked safely in my purse. Through the window, I watched Ethan's Tesla pull up, but he wasn't alone. Clara stepped out first, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "So much for keeping up appearances." "Bold move," Mark muttered beside me. "You sure you want to do this here?" Before I could answer, they walked in. Ethan's practiced smile faltered when he saw Mark. "I didn't realize this was a group dinner," he said, sliding into the booth. Clara hovered uncertainly before sitting next to him. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. I pushed Grace's old property records across the table. "Want to explain why you're so interested in these?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "You've been going through Grace's papers?" "No, you have. Mia told me about your little treasure hunt." I watched his face carefully. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Clara's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. The sleeve of her dress slipped, revealing fresh bruises. "Liddy." Ethan leaned forward, his voice dropping to that smooth, controlling tone I used to mistake for concern. "Whatever you think you know." "I know about the money laundering." I cut in. "The shell companies. The properties. Grace knew too, didn't she? That's why she put that clause in her will." The color drained from his face. Clara's glass slipped, water spilling across the white tablecloth. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," Ethan whispered. These people. Mark interrupted. "The ones buying properties through your shell companies? The ones Grace was investigating before she died."
Died.
The word hung in the air like smoke. My grandmother's heart attack last year suddenly felt less natural. "Mom?" Mia's voice cut through the tension. She stood at our table, school backpack still on. "What's going on?" "Mia?" I started to stand. "What are you doing here?" I followed Dad. Her voice cracked. "I heard him on the phone earlier. He said something about making sure you didn't become a problem like Grace." Ethan reached for her. "Sweetheart. Don't touch me." She backed away, bumping into a waiter. Plates crashed to the floor. In the chaos that followed, I saw Ethan's mask finally slip. The look he gave me wasn't anger or shame, it was fear. Not of me, but of something bigger. Something that had already claimed my grandmother. I grabbed Mia's hand and Mark's arm. "We're leaving. Now." "Liddy, wait." Ethan called after us. But I was done waiting. Done being the quiet, understanding wife. My grandmother had died protecting our family from whatever Ethan had gotten involved in. I wouldn't make the same mistake. Mark's safe house turned out to be a small cabin just outside the city. As Mia slept on the worn couch, I "You need to see this," I said, handing it to Mark. He scanned the pages, his face growing darker. Grace was gathering evidence against Ethan's partners. Property records, bank statements. She knew they were using his developments to launder money. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, I saw Clara hurrying toward the cabin, looking over her shoulder. "Don't," Mark warned, but I was already opening the door. "They killed her," Clara blurted out, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Grace." She confronted them about the yoga studio deal, and She pressed a USB drive into my hand. "Everything's here." The proof Grace collected. "I've been helping her for months." "You knew?" My voice cracked. "All this time. She recruited me after they threatened my sister. Said she needed someone on the inside." Clara's hands shook. "The affair was her idea. To get close to Ethan. To protect you and Mia." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "My grandmother arranged your affair with my husband?" "Mom." Mia stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Someone's coming." Headlights swept across the cabin windows. Multiple vehicles. "It's them," Clara whispered. Ethan told them everything at the restaurant. About the will, the evidence. "Get in the bathroom," Mark ordered, grabbing his phone. "Both of you."
Now.
I pulled Mia close, hurrying her toward the back. "What about you?" "I'll stall them. My security systems already alerted the police." "Mark."
Go.
The bathroom was tiny, barely big enough for the three of us. I held Mia against me, feeling her heart race as footsteps approached the cabin. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered. "I tried to help Grace protect you, but I made everything worse." "Mom?" Mia's voice quivered. "Is Dad out there?" Before I could answer, we heard the front door splinter. Mark's voice, then Ethan's, rising in argument. A sudden crash. A gunshot. Mia stifled a scream against my shoulder. I pressed Grace's USB drive into her hand, remembering my grandmother's final words in the letter. Sometimes protecting those we love means letting go of who we thought they were. More footsteps approached the bathroom. Ethan's voice closer now. "Liddy, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I looked at my daughter's terrified face, at Clara's bruises, thought of Grace's sacrifice. All the women hurt by men who claimed to love them. The bathroom doorknob began to turn. The bathroom door burst open, and there stood Ethan, but not the polished businessman I'd married. His suit was wrinkled, hair wild, a gun trembling in his hand. "Where's the drive?" His voice cracked. Behind him, I glimpsed Mark on the cabin floor, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Still alive. Still fighting. "Dad, please," Mia whispered. Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. Doubt. Fear. Maybe even shame. But then a deeper voice called from the living room. "Handle it, Carson. Now." I stepped forward, pushing Mia behind me. "You killed my grandmother." "I didn't," Ethan started. "You let them kill her." My voice stayed steady, channeling Grace's strength. "She trusted you. We all did."
You don't understand.
"These people, they own everything. The properties, the businesses." His hand shook harder. "They own me." Sirens wailed in the distance. Clara moved suddenly, grabbing for the gun. They struggled, and I seized the moment, shoving them both back. Mia darted past, running for Mark. The gun skittered across the floor. "It's over, Ethan," I said, standing between him and the others. Grace made sure of that. His face contorted. The evidence died with her.
No.
I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's cleverness. It's been in plain sight all along. Every property deed, every transaction, hidden in the library's special collections. In books you never bothered to read. The sirens grew closer. Heavy footsteps pounded through the cabin. "You're lying," he snarled, lunging for me. But I was done being afraid. Done being the quiet wife who looked the other way. I stepped aside, letting his momentum carry him forward, watching him stumble. Grace knew you'd never look there, I said as police officers flooded in. Because you never saw us, the women in your life, as anything but decorations. That was your mistake. As they handcuffed him, Ethan finally looked broken. Not from losing his freedom or his reputation, but from realizing how completely he'd underestimated us all, Grace, Clara, me. Mom, Mia called from where paramedics worked on Mark. Is it really over? I went to her, holding her close as we watched them lead Ethan away. Through the window, dawn was breaking over the trees. I thought of Grace's letter, her final words making sense at last. The truth doesn't always set us free, darling. Sometimes we have to free ourselves first. Yes, I told Mia, feeling lighter than I had in years. It's over. And we're just beginning. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated Grace Thompson Memorial Library, running my fingers along the spines of books that had once hidden my grandmother's secrets. The morning light streamed through tall windows, catching the brass nameplate on her portrait. Mom, Mia called from the reading nook. Mr. Graham's here. The elderly professor made his way through the stacks, leaning on his cane. Quite a transformation, he said, glancing around. Grace would be proud. She planned it all, I said, thinking of the inheritance that had made this possible. Right down to the last detail. Mark appeared from the rare books room, his arm finally free of its sling. Security systems installed. Though I doubt anyone will try hiding evidence in library books again. We shared a knowing smile. After Ethan's arrest, his criminal partners had all been caught, their money laundering scheme exposed. The properties were being converted into community spaces, starting with this library. The door chimed, and Clara walked in, carrying yoga mats. Ready for the morning class? She'd started teaching free sessions in the community room, turning her past into something healing. Actually, I said, there's something I need to show you all first. I led them to Grace's reading room, where a package waited on her old desk. Inside was her journal, delivered by her lawyer that morning. She wrote this the week before she died, I explained, opening to the marked page. It's not just about the evidence or Ethan. It's about us, all the people she knew would help me when everything fell apart. Mr. Graham nodded knowingly. The books we read, the people we trust, they're never random choices, are they? Mia picked up Rebecca from the desk, Mr. Graham's gift from the hospital. Like this one? About secrets and justice. And new beginnings, Mark added softly, his hand brushing mine. The morning yoga class started filtering in, their voices drifting through the library. Clara excused herself to teach, squeezing my arm as she passed. We'd all found our ways to heal, to rebuild. You know, Mia said, studying Grace's portrait, I used to think revenge meant making someone hurt like they hurt you. But Grandma Grace knew better, didn't she? I thought of Ethan in prison, of all the pain and secrets that had led us here. The best revenge is living well, I quoted from Grace's journal. But more importantly, living truthfully. As everyone dispersed, I noticed an envelope tucked in the journal's back cover, marked for the day after you think it's all over. I smiled, leaving it sealed for now. Grace had taught me that some mysteries are better saved for tomorrow. Today was for living in the light we'd found, in the strength we'd built together. The morning sun warmed the library's wooden floors, and somewhere, I knew, Grace was smiling.